When one of the most famous men on the planet stood up from a corner booth in a 24-hour diner and told a stranger to get his hands off a waitress, the entire restaurant went completely silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums and makes you notice your own heartbeat. It was Tuesday, October 17th, 2023, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 11:47 p.m. A diner called Mel's Place on Government Street. 14 tables, red vinyl booths, black and white checkered floor so old the pattern had worn smooth in the high traffic areas. The air smelled like coffee that had been sitting on the burner for 3 hours and French fries cooked in oil that needed changing. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead with that particular frequency that sounds like a headache waiting to happen. The man who stood up was 7 feet 1 inch tall. He weighed 325 pounds. He had to turn his shoulders sideways to get out of the booth. His hands were the size of dinner plates. His voice when he spoke was the voice you know from television, from commercials, from stadiums, but quieter here, steadier, more dangerous in its calmness. The man he was speaking to was 34 years old, wearing a Tulane University sweatshirt, drunk enough to be loud, but not drunk enough to be falling down. He had his hand wrapped around the wrist of a young woman in a green apron. She was 26 years old. Her name was Sierra Arsenault, and she had been asking him politely for 7 minutes to please let go. Music, Shaquille O'Neal said 3 words. "Get your hands off her." The drunk man turned around. He saw who was speaking. His face went through 5 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, disbelief, fear, and then something ugly that people sometimes choose when fear makes them feel small. "Mind your business," he said. Shaq took 1 step forward, just one. The floor creaked under his weight. "This is my business now." The man let go of Sierra's wrist. He stumbled backward. He knocked over a ketchup bottle on table 7. It rolled across the table and fell onto the floor with a wet plastic thud. Nobody moved to pick it up. Sierra Arsenault stood there with her freed wrist pressed against her chest, breathing hard, staring at the man who had just stood up for her. And then something happened that nobody in that diner understood. Her eyes went very wide. Her mouth opened slightly. She took 1 small step backward. Not in fear, in recognition. She knew that voice, music. But here is what nobody in Mel's Place knew that night. Here is the part that makes this story something else entirely. Sierra Arsenault was not just a waitress working the graveyard shift at a 24-hour diner on Government Street. She was the daughter of a man who had changed Shaquille O'Neal's life 32 years earlier. A man who had seen something in a too-tall teenager from Newark when nobody else had. A man who had died 4 years ago without ever telling his daughter that the biggest basketball player on the planet still called him twice a year just to say thank you. And when Shaq turned to check on Sierra, when he asked her quietly if she was okay, she heard it. She heard the voice that used to come through the phone on Tuesday evenings when she was in high school. The voice her father would take in the other room. The voice that always made him smile. Stay with us through this entire video, because what happens next when Sierra finally tells Shaq who she is, when she shows him the photograph she carries in her apron pocket, when Shaq discovers what her father never told him and what Sierra has been carrying alone for 4 years, it will change everything you thought you knew about loyalty and grief and the debts we carry in silence. Music. To understand what happened in that diner at 11:47 p.m., you have to go back. You have to go back past the championships, past the fame, past the commercials and the movies and the doctorate degree. You have to go back to 1989. You have to go back to Louisiana State University. You have to go back to a freshman named Shaquille O'Neal, who was 6 feet 11 inches tall and still growing, still learning what his body could do, still figuring out how to exist in a world that had not been built for someone his size. Shaquille Rashawn O'Neal was born March 6, 1972 in Newark, New Jersey. His mother, Lucille O'Neal, raised him with one rule that never changed. How you treat people when they treat you badly, that is who you really are. His stepfather, Sergeant Philip Harrison, U.S. Army, moved the family from base to base. Germany, Georgia, Texas. Shaq learned early that you carry home inside you. You don't wait for a place to give it to you. He arrived at LSU in the fall of 1989, 18 years old, impossible to miss. The assistant coach who recruited him was a man named Marcus Arsenault, 41 years old, from Plaquemine, Louisiana. A man who believed that basketball was about character first and talent second. He had coached high school ball for 12 years before LSU hired him. He was quiet. He was steady. He was the kind of coach who remembered players' mothers' names and asked about their siblings and noticed when someone was struggling with something that had nothing to do with the game. Marcus Arsenault saw Shaq not as a project but as a person. He saw a young man who was too big for every desk, every door frame, every bed. A young man who got stared at everywhere he went. A young man who sometimes ate meals alone because he was tired of being a spectacle. Marcus started bringing him home for Sunday dinners. His wife, Claudine, cooked. His daughter, Sierra, 8 years old at the time, sat across from this giant teenager and asked him questions about what it was like being so tall. Shaq answered every single one. Music. Marcus Arsenault died on November 3, 2019. Heart attack. He was 71 years old. He died in his backyard in Baton Rouge, raking leaves on a Saturday morning. Claudine found him. Sierra was in Houston at the time, working as a pharmaceutical sales rep, making good money, living in a one-bedroom apartment she was proud of. She came home for the funeral. She stayed for 3 weeks. And when those 3 weeks were over, she realized her mother could not afford to keep the house on Government Street, could not afford the property taxes, could not afford the repairs, could not afford to stay in the home where she had lived for 43 years. Sierra quit her job in Houston. She moved back to Baton Rouge. She took 3 jobs. Morning shift at a coffee shop, afternoon administrative work at a dentist's office, graveyard shift 4 nights a week at Mel's place. She made $2,847 a month between all 3 jobs. The house payment, the property taxes, the utilities, her mother's medications for diabetes and high blood pressure, the car insurance, the groceries, it came to $4,190. Every single month, she was $1,343 short. She had been covering the difference with credit cards for 4 years. She owed $19,600 across 3 cards. The minimum payments alone were $580 a month. Her mother did not know. Sierra told no one. Music. At Mel's place that Tuesday night, after the drunk man stumbled out into the parking lot and after the other customers slowly started eating again, and after the manager, a heavy-set man named Dale, came out from the kitchen and asked if everything was okay, Shaq sat back down in his corner booth. Sierra walked over. She was carrying a coffee pot in one hand. Her other hand, the one the drunk man had grabbed, was shaking slightly. "Thank you," she said quietly. Shaq looked up at her. "You okay?" "I'm okay." She refilled his coffee cup, even though it was still 3/4 full. She did it just to have something to do with her hands. "I know who you are," she said. Shaq smiled the small smile, the tired one that comes out when someone recognizes you for the 10,000th time. "Yeah, I figured." "No," Sierra said. She set the coffee pot down on the table. "I mean, I know who you are." She reached into the front pocket of her green apron. She pulled out a photograph. It was small, 3 inches by 4 inches, bent at one corner, faded at the edges from being carried. She held it out to him. Shaq took it. The photograph showed a much younger version of himself, 19 years old, LSU jersey, sitting at a dinner table with a middle-aged black man in a polo shirt. They were both laughing. In the background, barely visible, was a little girl with braids holding a basketball that was almost as big as she was. Shaq stared at the photograph for a long time. Then he looked up at Sierra, then back down at the photograph. "Marcus," he said. "My father," Sierra said. Her voice cracked on the word, father. She pressed her hand over her mouth. She did not cry. She just stood there, pressing her hand against her mouth like she could hold the emotion inside if she tried hard enough. Music. Shaq stood up slowly. He handed the photograph back to her very carefully, like it was made of something more fragile than paper. "When did he?" "4 years ago. November." "I didn't know." His voice was barely above a whisper. "I should have known. I should have been there. He never told anybody. He didn't want a big thing." "He called me," Shaq said, "twice a year, every year, April and October, just to check in." Sierra nodded. "I know. Tuesday evenings. He always took it in the other room. They stood there in the middle of Mel's place at midnight under the fluorescent lights with the smell of old coffee between them. Two people connected by a man who was gone. "Are you," Shaq started, "are you doing okay?" Sierra's composure broke, not dramatically, just quietly, the way a thread snaps when it has been pulled too tight for too long. "I'm trying," she whispered. Shaq asked her to sit. She did. And for the next 40 minutes, in a corner booth in a 24-hour diner in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Sierra Arsenault told Shaquille O'Neal everything her father never told him. About the house, about her mother, about the 3 jobs, about the $19,600, about the $1,343 every single month that she could not figure out how to find. Shaq listened. He did not interrupt. He did not offer solutions. He just listened the way Marcus had taught him to listen 32 years earlier. When she finished, he asked for her phone. She gave it to him. He put his number in. He handed it back. "I need you to do something for me," he said. "Okay. I need you to trust me for about 3 days." Music. On Friday, October 20th, 2023, Sierra Arsenault received a phone call from Community First Bank. The woman on the other end said there had been a payment made to her credit card accounts, all 3 of them, in full. Total amount, $19,627.43. Sierra asked who made the payment. The woman said she could not disclose that information. Sierra sat down on the floor of her mother's kitchen and cried. On Monday, October 23rd, she received a letter. It was from the law office of Henderson and Associates in downtown Baton Rouge. Inside was a document showing that the property taxes on her mother's house had been paid in full for the next 5 years. Also inside was a check for $25,000 made out to Claudine Arsenault with a note that read, "For the coach who taught me that being big means nothing if you don't stand for something." On Wednesday, October 25th, Sierra got a text from the number Shaq had entered into her phone. It said, "There's one more thing. Can you meet me at LSU tomorrow? Noon. Assembly Center." She met him. He took her to an office. Inside was the athletic director and 2 other people she did not recognize. They told her about the Marquise Arsenault Memorial Scholarship, full tuition, room and board, for student athletes who demonstrated character, funded annually, starting next semester, forever. Sierra looked at Shaq. He was standing in the corner with his arms crossed, not smiling, just watching her. "Your father gave me a life," he said quietly. "This is the smallest part of what I owe him." Music. Before you go, drop a comment right now and tell us where you are watching from. It could be Baton Rouge. It could be Newark. It could be anywhere someone taught you that character matters more than talent. We read every single one, and we love knowing where our community is watching from all around the world. And if this story moved you even a little, if it reminded you of a coach or a teacher or a parent who saw you when nobody else did, please hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it helps this story reach someone who needs to remember that the debts we owe to the people who shaped us are never fully paid. They are passed on. If you are new here, welcome. This is a channel about the quiet moments that change everything. Subscribe and join a community that believes loyalty outlives loss. Share this video with one person today. Just one, because that is exactly how gratitude travels. One person, one moment, one debt honored at a time. Now click on the video appearing on your screen right now, because the next story is about the things we carry in silence and the people who notice. We will see you there.